The rain fell on London not as a blessing, but as a freezing curse. It soaked Noor's dark hair, trickled in cold strands down her neck, and seeped into her thin coat, which was more a symbol of her struggle than real protection. Each drop that hit the asphalt was a drumming echo of the weariness in her soul. In her arms little Layla, just 3 years old, was wrapped in a blanket already damp at the edges, her face pale and serious, her eyes closed in restless sleep. It was almost 11 p.m., and the last shop in the bustling neighborhood was closing its doors. Noor worked cleaning offices, a quiet night job that paid poorly, but allowed her to be with Layla during the day, in an endless cycle of exhaustion. Her hands, calloused from cleaning products, trembled slightly as she adjusted the child in her arms. The memory of what they had fled, the roar of the planes, the dust rising from the ruins of their home in Mosul, her husband's final cry, was a wound that never healed, a shadow that danced in the darkest corners of her mind. She lived in a small, damp, expensive room, where mold vied for space with the colorful drawings Layla made on the wall. The peace she had so desperately sought seemed like a mirage, always receding into the city's gray horizon. As she hurried toward the bus stop, her cloth bag containing cleaning supplies brushing against her leg, she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. Hunger. She had given the last portion of soup to Layla. She prioritized the girl's milk, bread, shelter. She herself was last on her own list. The bus arrived, its yellow lights cutting through the curtain of rain. Noor boarded, the card beeping with a sound that always made her hold her breath, and she found a seat in the back. Layla whimpered, and Noor whispered a lullaby in Arabic, a sad and beautiful melody from a time and place that no longer existed. Peace was an abstract, distant concept. Reality was back pain, bone-chilling cold, the constant fear of not being enough for her daughter. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of Layla's small body against her chest, the only source of true warmth in her icy universe. It was for that soft breath, for that heart beating close to hers, that she endured everything. Every scrape on the floor, every disdainful glance, every sleepless night. All for Layla. All for a sliver of hope that one day, perhaps, the storm within her would finally find calm. The bus swayed, a rhythmic monotonous noise that almost lulled her into a dangerous sleep. She needed to be alert to get off at the right stop. It was then that a different sound caught her attention. It wasn't the engine noise or the splash of tires on the water. It was a low, gasping groan. Noor opened her eyes and looked at the seat in front of her. An elderly gentleman, perhaps in his 70s, was hunched over, one hand pressed against his chest, the other gripping the leather bag on his lap. His face was pale, a sickly gray, and a thin layer of sweat covered his forehead, mingling with the dampness of the rain on his clothes. The people around seemed intentionally disinterested, absorbed in their phones or staring into the darkness outside, creating a bubble of indifference around the man's suffering. Noor felt a chill that wasn't from the rain. She knew that look of pain, of silent despair. It was a look she had seen many times in her homeland. Instinct pulled her forward, but fear pulled her back. She was a foreigner, a refugee. Any problem, any misunderstanding, and she could lose everything. Layla mumbled in her sleep. That small sound was a reminder of what was important. Kindness had no nationality. Compassion didn't need a visa. With infinite care, she stood up, balancing Layla in one arm, and approached the man. "Sir? Are you all right, sir?" Her voice was a whisper, heavy with an accent she was still trying to tame. The man looked up, glassy and full of panic. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse sigh escaped his lips. Noor didn't think twice. She sat beside him, supported Layla so the child wouldn't slip, and with her free hands, began to do what her grandmother had taught her in times of crisis. With firm but gentle pressure, she massaged his back, speaking in calm, comforting Arabic, words he couldn't understand, but whose melody was universal. "Breathe, Grandpa. Breathe slowly. Everything will be all right." She took a bottle of water she kept for Layla and offered it to him. Her hands trembled, but her touch was steady. She had journeyed to a place beyond fear, guided only by humanity. The man slowly began to breathe more easily. Color slowly returned to his face. He didn't speak, only inclined his head in a gesture of deep gratitude, his teary eyes fixed on hers. When the bus stopped at a busy stop, He got off, still weak but steady. He looked at Noor through the window, a final look laden with an emotion that words could not describe. She simply nodded, a small, tired smile on her lips. The peace she had sought for herself, she had momentarily given to a stranger. And for an instant it warmed something within her, a small ember of dignity that hard life had tried to extinguish. She settled back down, hugging Layla, unaware that this simple act had planted a seed that would blossom in a way she could never have imagined. The following morning arrived with the sound of persistent rain beating against the window of her small room. Layla was still asleep, exhausted from the previous night. Noor moved like a ghost, preparing the girls' breakfast, bread with butter and a glass of warm milk. Her mind, however, was far away, revisiting the scene on the bus. Was the man all right? Should she have insisted on calling an ambulance? A chill ran down her spine, making her fear that her action, though well-intentioned, could have consequences. She was invisible, and she preferred it that way. Drawing attention was a risk. While Layla ate, distracted by a worn-out stuffed toy, Noor cleaned the small room, her hands immersed in bleach, the strong smell filling the air. Suddenly, firm, decisive knocks on the door. 3 knocks that echoed like gunshots in the silence of the room. Noor's heart stopped. She froze, the sponge still dripping in her hand. Who could it be? The landlady, demanding the overdue rent? Someone from the government? The police? The worst-case scenarios unfolded in her mind in the blink of an eye. Layla, sensing the tension, ran and clung to her mother's leg, her small face filled with fear. "Mom!" Noor swallowed hard. "Be quiet, Habibti," she whispered, her voice trembling. The knocking repeated, a little more insistent. It was useless to hide. With leaden legs, she approached the door, hesitating for a long moment before unlocking it and opening it just a crack, her heart pounding so hard she feared they could hear. On the other side was neither the landlady nor an officer. It was a tall, elegant man, wearing an expensive overcoat that seemed immune to the rain. He had an imposing posture, but his face, under a black umbrella held by an assistant, was not stern. It was serious, intense, and his eyes, a deep gray like the London sky, stared at her with overwhelming curiosity. It was the man from the bus, but transformed. In the dim light of the vehicle, he seemed fragile. Now, he radiated a silent power that made Noor want to close the door. "You," he said, his voice deep, a calm vibration that contrasted with Noor's inner storm. "I spent the whole night looking for you." Noor didn't say a word. She just gripped the door tighter, her body instinctively protecting Layla, her dark eyes, full of a life of caution, fixed on him, anticipating the blow that was sure to come. The man, sensing the palpable dread emanating from Noor, took a step back, a calculated gesture to lessen the feeling of threat. "Please," he said, his voice softer now. "I don't want to frighten you. My name is Alistair Thornfield." The name meant nothing to Noor, but it carried weight in the world outside that tenement. I need to thank you for what you did last night." His gray eyes moved from her to little Layla, who was peeking out from behind her mother's legs. Seeing the child, something in his rigid face melted. A flash of tenderness, genuine and unexpected, softened his features. Layla, with the innocent courage of those who haven't yet learned to fear strangers, took a small step forward, her teddy bear hanging loosely from her hand. She looked at Alistair, then at the impassive assistant with the umbrella, and then offered a shy smile. It was a ray of sunshine cutting through the darkness of that damp corridor. The tension in the air seemed to lessen by a millimeter. I didn't do anything," Noor finally managed to say, her voice a whisper. "I just tried to help." "You did much more than just," Alistair replied, his gaze now fixed back on her, studying every detail of her tired but resilient face. "You acted when no one else did. The doctor said that, if it weren't for your intervention, the crisis could have been much worse. I have a heart condition." He paused, and Noor could see, behind the Tycoon's facade, the trace of the frightened man from the bus. "I've spent my life building empires, surrounded by people who want something from me. And in my moment of greatest vulnerability, it was a stranger, for no reason at all, who reached out." He looked again at the tiny room behind her, at the Spartan simplicity of her existence. His eyes landed on the empty plastic bowl on the table, Layla's only toy. He said nothing, but Noor felt a wave of shame burn her face. She was used to poverty, but not to pity. "Thank you," she said, beginning to close the door. "I'm glad you're all right. Now please I need—" "Wait," Alistair interrupted, gently, but with an authority that made her stop. He took something from the inside pocket of his coat. It wasn't a wallet, but a simple business card, made of paper so thick and textured that Noor could feel its quality even from a distance. "This is for you. There's an address written on the back. A cafe. Please meet me there today at 2 p.m. It's important." He held out the card. Noor hesitated, her fingers stained with cleaning fluid trembling slightly before taking it. She didn't look. "Why?" she whispered. An almost imperceptible smile touched Alistair's lips. "Because sometimes, life gives us a chance to return a favor. And I'm not a man to leave debts unpaid." Without another word he nodded to Layla, who waved back with her little hand, then turned and disappeared down the stairs, his imposing presence filling the empty space he left behind. Noor closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. She looked at the card. Alistair Thornfield. Thornfield Global Industries. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it was very, very far from her world. Doubt and a tiny thread of hope fought within her. The coffee was hot and smelled of roasted beans and sweet bread. An alien world of leather armchairs, soft lighting, and the muffled sound of civilized conversation. Noor sat at a corner table, feeling completely out of place in her simple, clean dress, Layla quiet beside her, impressed by the surroundings. Every passing minute made Noor question her sanity for having come. She was about to run away when he arrived. Alistair Thornfield seemed to fill the space differently in the daylight. Less a shadow, more a solid, real presence. He sat down, dismissed the assistant with a nod, and ordered tea for her and juice for Layla without even asking. His efficiency was frightening. "Thank you for coming," he began, his gray eyes scanning her face, reading the story of deprivation written in every line. "I couldn't leave things as they were." Noor remained silent, her hands clasped in her lap, waiting for the other toe of her shoe to fall. She took a sip of water. "I've looked you up. I know you're Noor al-Haddadi, a refugee from Iraq, granted asylum. You live alone with your daughter, Layla. You work as a night cleaner." Each word was a blow, an invasion. She flinched. "Please don't cause me trouble." Alistair shook his head, an unusual expression of frustration on his face. "That's not my intention. On the contrary. I want to get you out of trouble." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, and his voice lowered to a more intimate and intense tone. "Noor, what you did for me was pure. It was human. Something I haven't experienced in a long time. I've seen where you live. I see the struggle in your eyes. And I can't in good conscience simply say thank you and move on." He paused, letting his words resonate. "I have a proposal. A job offer." Noor looked at him, confused. I already have a job." "Not that kind of job," he said with a dismissive nod. "My house, it's big. Very big. It needs a housekeeper, someone to take care of it, to bring life to that place. It's a lifetime position, with a salary that will allow you to live with dignity, that will give Layla everything she deserves: security, education, a future." Noor felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. It was a dream. A dangerous dream. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice heavy with disbelief. "Because," he replied, his gaze fixed on hers, deep and penetrating. "I trust your integrity. I saw. And because—" he hesitated, something rare for a man like him. "Because loneliness in a large house can be more frightening than poverty in a small room. And I believe that you and Layla could bring a light that has been missing for a long time." He was offering a lifeline. But at what price? Was the peace she sought to exchange one self for another, even a gilded one? She looked at Layla, who was smiling, drinking her juice. She deserved more. Much more. Fear and hope waged an epic battle in her chest. The silence at the table was thick, heavy with the weight of the decision hanging between them. Noor could hear the blood pounding in her ears. A job. A house. Security. Words that seemed straight out of a fairy tale for someone like her. But fairy tales, she knew, often hid wolves in sheep's clothing. She looked at Alistair, trying to read behind the Tycoon's mask. He didn't look like a monster. He looked tired. Lonely. There was an authenticity in his gratitude, a vulnerability he couldn't completely hide. "I don't know how to be a housekeeper," she admitted, her voice firmer now, facing the reality of the proposal. "I only know how to clean. And fight to survive." Alistair nodded, a gesture of dissipated impatience. "That's all I need. Someone who sees the house not as an asset, but as a home. Someone who knows the value of a safe place. You can learn the rest. I'll hire people to teach you." His offer was irresistible. It was a leap in the dark, an act of blind faith. But her whole life had been a leap into the dark. Fleeing Mosul with Layla in her arms, still a baby, had been the biggest of them all. She took a deep breath, the smell of coffee and sweet bread filling her lungs. She thought of the landlady, the musty smell, the backache, the constant fear of Layla getting sick in that damp room. She thought of her daughter's future. No education. No opportunities. Repeating her cycle of poverty. And then she thought of the old man's hand on her chest, and the peace she felt helping him. Kindness had a face. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. She looked into Alistair's eyes, searching for any sign of falsehood. All she saw was serene determination. "All right," she said, the word coming out as a sigh, carrying the weight of her old life and the lightness of the new. "I accept." Alistair didn't smile, but his eyes lit up with deep satisfaction. He nodded. "Okay. Can we go now? My driver is outside. We can get your things." The speed was a shock. "Now? There's no reason to wait," he said, rising. "When I see something I want, I seize the opportunity." The choice of words echoed in her mind. 星号 something I want 星号. Noor stood, took Layla's hand. Her legs were weak, but her heart, for the first time in years, beat with a rhythm that wasn't fear, but cautious anticipation. She was leaping into the dark. But for the first time, there was a promise of light on the other side. The car was silent as a tomb, a large, dark vehicle gliding through the London streets like a shadow. Layla, enchanted, pressed her face against the window, watching the city she'd only ever seen from a crowded bus pass by like a film. Noor sat upright, her sweaty hands clasped in her lap, watching Alistair's profile as he spoke on the phone in low, authoritative tones. He was organizing his life with an efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying. They left the congested city behind, and entered a suburb of tree-lined streets and high walls. Noor's anxiety grew with each turn. Finally, the car glided through an ornate iron gate that opened silently, revealing a long, winding avenue. At its end, the house rose. It wasn't a house. It was a mansion. An imposing structure of light stone, with tall windows and columns, towering over immaculate gardens that, even under the gray sky, seemed vibrant and green. Noor held her breath. Layla let out a small wow of admiration. It was a completely alien world. The car stopped in front of a wide staircase. Alistair got out and extended his hand to help Noor down. His touch was firm, brief, but she felt an electric shock of contact. She was trembling. "Welcome to Thornfield Hall," he said, his voice echoing faintly off the silent facade of the house. The front door opened, revealing a vast foyer with a marble floor and a double staircase that curved gracefully to the upper floor. It was beautiful, opulent, and coldly impersonal. It felt like a museum, not a home. A middle-aged woman, wearing a gray suit, greeted Alistair with a respectful nod. "Mrs. Davies, my housekeeper," he introduced. "She will show you your rooms and explain your duties." Mrs. Davies assessed Noor with a quick, professional glance, without a spark of warmth. Noor felt even smaller, an intruder in that realm of order and wealth. Alistair turned to her. "Rest. Make yourself comfortable. The house is yours to take care of." He then left, his footsteps echoing on the marble, leaving Noor and Layla alone in the vast hall with the housekeeper. The gate door was closed. She was inside. The security she had so desperately sought now seemed like a gilded, intimidating cage. She took Layla's hand, feeling the small, warm grip of her daughter, her only anchor in this sea of marble and doubt. The quarters assigned to them weren't a bedroom, they were a suite. A spacious room for her and Layla, with a large, soft bed, a beautiful new crib for the little girl, and a private sitting room with a small kitchen. It was more luxurious than anything Noor could have imagined. But the grandeur of the place was overwhelming. In the days that followed, Mrs. Davies was a strict and distant teacher. She showed Noor the intricate rituals of the house, how to polish the silverware, how to care for the artwork, the schedules for everything. The house staff, cooks, gardeners, maids, watched Noor with a curiosity mixed with disdain and disbelief. She was the talk of the town. The refugee Mr. Thornfield had brought out of nowhere. Whispers followed her through the corridors. He found her on a bus. She cleaned offices. What does he really want with her? Noor ignored the whispers. She worked. She learned. She dedicated herself with the same fierce determination that had kept her alive. Her hands, which had once scrubbed the floors of public offices, now tended to fine silks and rare woods. She brought a quiet meticulousness and genuine care to her work. As she cleaned, she observed. She saw the loneliness of the house. The vast, empty rooms, the unoccupied chairs at the dining room, the absence of laughter. She saw Alistair, always working, always distant, a solitary figure at the head of a table large enough for 20 people. He observed her too. His appearances were sudden and silent. He would appear in the library while she polished the shelves, asking about Layla, about whether she was settling in. His gray eyes watched her with an intensity that left her breathless. It wasn't the gaze of a master for a maid. It was something deeper, more possessive, more desirous. He desired her. Noor felt that gaze like a physical touch. It was frightening and, to her own surprise, deeply exciting. One day, he found her in the conservatory, watering the orchids. Layla was running among the plants, laughing. "She brought the sound back to this house," Alistair commented, his voice soft. Noor turned, surprised. "The sound." "Laughter," he simply said. And in that moment, under the filtered light of the glass, Noor didn't see the Tycoon. She saw a man who had lost himself in his own fortress. And something inside her, something maternal and protective, wanted to reach him. Fear began to mingle with a strange and forbidden spark of connection. A month passed. Noor began to feel more confident in her role. The house, under her quiet care, seemed to lose some of its iciness. Even Mrs. Davies granted a rare nod of approval. Layla blossomed, her cheeks gaining color, her personality expanding in the safety of the ample space. One night, a fierce storm hit London. The electricity flickered and went out in the mansion. Noor, accustomed to crises, was not perturbed. She took candles and went to the library, where she knew there would be a fireplace. To her surprise, Alistair was already there, seated in a leather armchair, watching the flames, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The light of the flames danced on his face, softening his angular features. "Noor," he said, his voice a little rough. "Come in. Is Layla asleep?" "Yes," she replied, pausing in the doorway, hesitant. "Sit down," he ordered gently, indicating the opposite armchair. She sat down, the flames warming her skin. The silence was intimate, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the roar of the wind outside. "This house, it's been in my family for generations," Alistair began, his gaze lost in the flames. "It was a home once. Full of life. Of love." He paused, taking a sip of whiskey. "My wife, she fell ill. A long, painful illness. She died in this house. After that, the light went out. Everything was gone. I buried myself in work. The people around me, our employees, partners, adversaries. Nobody real." He turned and looked at Noor, his eyes reflecting the fire, filled with a raw pain she deeply recognized. And then, on a rainy night in the back of a dirty bus, a woman with the hands of a warrior, and the eyes of a sage reached out to a foolish old man. And I saw something in her. Something I hadn't seen in a long time. Courage. Purity. A strength that wasn't bought or inherited, but forged in the fire of adversity. He leaned forward, his voice a deep, hypnotic whisper. I didn't bring you here just out of gratitude, Noor. I brought you here because, from that moment on, I desired you. Not just your body, though I want that too. I desire your light. Your presence. Your soul in this empty house. I desire you in a way I can't even explain. The confession fell like a bomb in the silence of the room. It wasn't a proposal. It was a declaration. Raw, honest, and overwhelming. Noor felt tears burning in her eyes. Fear, confusion, but also a spark of something powerful and reciprocal. He saw her. He truly saw her. And no one in his entire life had ever seen her that way. Alistair's confession hung in the air between them, a heavy silken veil laden with possibilities. Noor didn't respond that night. She couldn't. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. His desire was overwhelming, but the honesty behind it was undeniable. He wasn't trying to buy her. He was offering himself to her, in a twisted and intense way. In the days that followed, something changed. The tension didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became a conscious dance. Alistair stopped merely observing her. He began to seek her out. He dined with her and Layla, at smaller, more intimate tables. He asked about her childhood in Iraq, about her dreams. He listened, truly listened, to her stories. And slowly, Noor began to open up. She spoke of Mosul, of the smell of spices in the market, of the shade of the palm trees, of her love for her husband, lost to a senseless war. She spoke of the fear of escape, of the desperate hope for a safe haven. He shared his own pain, the loneliness of power, the emptiness left by loss. They were no longer the Tycoon and the Refugee. They were two wounded souls, finding solace in each other. A year passed. Thornfield Hall was no longer a museum. It was a home. Layla's laughter echoed in the corridors. The smell of Noor's cooking, mingled with the cook's dishes, filled the air. She was no longer the housekeeper. She was the heart of the house. And Alistair? Alistair blossomed. The rigidity in his shoulders lessened. He smiled easily, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. The desire he confessed by the firelight had matured into a deep, respectful, and patient love. He loved Noor. He loved Layla as if she were his own. And Noor, who had only sought peace, found something far greater. He found a love born not of ease, but of shared adversity. She found a purpose that wasn't just to survive, but to live fully. She looked back at the woman on the bus in the rain, and could hardly recognize her. Peace wasn't a place, she realized. It was a state of mind. And she, the Iraqi refugee who only wanted a safe place for her daughter, had found her own peace in the most unlikely place. In the arms of the man who had desired her at first sight, and who in the end loved her for everything she was. Her kindness that rainy night didn't rescue her. It was the seed from which a new beginning, a new love, and a new family blossomed, proving that the brightest light can sometimes emerge from the deepest darkness.